What if all hope in the universe had been extinguished, and then, against all odds, a single being appeared, a beacon of willpower in the darkest of times? The galaxy was dying, not in whispers, not in slow decay, but in screams that echoed across the stars. Entire systems were consumed in flames before their people could even understand the nature of the terror descending upon them. From the icy voids of the segmentum, obscurus to the sunless voids surrounding the Eye of Terror, the imperium of man struggled under the weight of unending war. Tyranid hive fleets consumed entire worlds, leaving only barren husks. Necron tomb worlds awoke from their eternal slumber, seeking the silence of death. Orcs rampaged with their violent, anarchic fervor, and Chaos, the great corrupter, whispered promises of power and despair to those foolish, or desperate, enough to listen. Humanity, for all its glory and ambition, seemed on the brink of complete annihilation. In this universe, hope was not merely scarce, it was almost extinct. The very notion of salvation felt like heresy, and yet, as the void burned with the fires of endless conflict, a rift appeared. Not in the warp, which writhed with malevolence and hunger, but in the fabric of reality itself. A sudden light pierced the darkness, brighter than any sun, yet strangely gentle, unburning, almost alive. And from that light emerged Hal Jordan, a man whose power came not from armies or weapons, but from the purity of his will. He hovered in the void, his green armor shimmering with energy that seemed almost alien to this galaxy, his ring glowing with the quiet hum of infinite potential. In his eyes, one could see the determination of 1,000 worlds, the courage of someone who had faced insurmountable odds and never yielded. Hal Jordan had been transported from his own reality, the universe of Earth, into a place so alien and hostile that even the guardians of the universe, the beings who had entrusted him with the Green Lantern ring, would have hesitated to intervene. The rules here were different. Physics bent unnaturally, reality itself was saturated with psychic poison, and the very act of hope was a dangerous rebellion. Yet he felt it, a tug on his conscience, a cry for aid from a universe that had forgotten the meaning of that word. The first world he saw was Cadia, or what remained of it. The planet's fortresses were shattered, orbital defenses shattered into fragments, and the ground itself bore scars where artillery and demon fire had erupted from the warp. Survivors moved like shadows across the debris, gaunt faces twisted by exhaustion, fear, and disbelief. Their leader, a commissar whose uniform bore the scars of countless battles, stood at the edge of a ruined plaza, barking orders to soldiers too weary to obey. When Hal's light first cut through the sky, his emerald glow reflected off the shattered armor and blood-stained walls, momentarily halting all motion. "By the Emperor, what is that?" muttered a sergeant. Hal's arrival was not subtle. He did not descend like a god granting mercy. He arrived with the authority of will made flesh, and the universe seemed to respond. Hive ships, biomechanical monstrosities of bone and chitin, hovered in orbit, sensing movement, aware of the intrusion. Yet their attack did not come immediately. There was a pause, a hesitation, as if the creatures themselves recognized the presence of a force they could neither consume nor understand. For Hal, the challenge was immediate. The ring, which drew power from the very essence of will, responded instinctively to the chaos around him. With a thought, he manifested a construct, a colossal green barrier, rising from the broken earth to shield the survivors from the incoming bombardment. The Hive fleet, accustomed to overwhelming firepower and psychic dread, met an unfamiliar resistance. Bolts of spore and bone shattered against the shimmering constructs, deflecting with the soundless force of pure energy. Soldiers, terrified and awestruck, witnessed what could only be described as a miracle. But Hal Jordan was not here to perform miracles for spectacle. He had to understand the rules of this universe. He had been trained to face threats that tested courage and resolve, yet the 41st millennium was a crucible unlike any he had known. Here, willpower alone was insufficient. The very fabric of existence was tainted by corruption, and even the purest thoughts could be twisted into despair. He sensed it in the air, in the ground, in the cries of the humans. The warp was strong here, more potent than any psychic storm he had ever encountered. And within that storm, eyes watched. Entities of darkness, ancient and malevolent, regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and malice. Yet, in the midst of this apocalyptic tableau, Hal felt something he had not expected: the stirrings of possibility. The Imperium's people, though broken, were resilient. Their faith, though warped by superstition and endless suffering, was a form of will, and his ring could amplify it, harness it, give it direction. The spark of hope was faint, but it was there, like a tiny ember in a storm, and he would fan it into a blaze. The reward for watching this story to its end, if you remain with me through the darkness of the 41st millennium, is this: you will witness a force capable of challenging the universe's greatest horrors, a being who bends reality not through brute force, but through sheer willpower. You will see how the light of one determined soul can ignite hope even when the stars themselves seem determined to snuff it out. And you will experience a tale of courage and despair, of sacrifice and revelation, unlike any other. Hal moved, and with each step, constructs formed around him, not only shields but weapons of unimaginable scale. Massive gauntlets, towers, and swords, all glowing with green energy, rose from the shattered ground. Tyranids surged forward, wave after wave, their chittering cries punctuated by the sound of carapaces cracking against impenetrable green constructs. For the first time in countless cycles, the humans of Cadio witnessed not despair, but defiance. The Commissar, initially skeptical, watched as Hal dispatched the creatures with precise, almost surgical strikes. By the Emperor's light, he whispered, eyes wide, realizing that this stranger was no ordinary warrior. He was something else entirely, something beyond the feeble understanding of the Imperium. And yet he fought not for conquest, not for glory, but for survival and, perhaps, for the faintest glimmer of hope. But even as Hal repelled the immediate threat, he understood the deeper challenge. The Tyranids were merely the first wave. Beyond them lay Necrons awakening from tomb worlds, Chaos armies waiting to corrupt, and the warp itself, a living ocean of malevolence, threatening to consume all that remained of humanity. He would need more than constructs. He would need allies, understanding, and a strategy that even the galaxy's most brilliant tacticians could not imagine. What do you do when a universe that has forgotten hope suddenly offers you a chance to survive, and yet everything you know tells you to fear it? Hal Jordan had repelled the immediate threat of the Tyranid advance, but he knew this victory was fleeting. In the 41st millennium, a single battle won did not mean the war was over. It meant only that the universe was giving you a moment to breathe before it crushed you entirely. And here, breathing was a dangerous luxury. The Commissar, his eyes still wide with disbelief, approached cautiously. What are you?" he demanded. His voice trembled, though his tone tried to project authority. "Are you some demon sent by chaos to tempt us?" Hal lowered his arm, letting the constructs dissolve into streams of green light that dissipated into the smoky air. "I am Hal Jordan. I am the Green Lantern. I protect life. I fight for hope, not conquest. I am here to help." The commissar's hand twitched toward his bolt pistol, uncertainty warring with survival instinct. Around them, the survivors, exhausted soldiers and civilians alike, watched silently, their faces etched with suspicion and awe. After countless betrayals, psychic horrors, and demonic infiltrations, a stranger who arrived in a shining suit of alien green armor could just as easily be a weapon of chaos as a savior. "Guard your tongue, human," the commissar finally barked. "Hope is a luxury we cannot afford. The Imperium survives because it does not dream, it obeys. You may speak of hope, but your words mean nothing without action." Hal did not flinch. He had faced fear before, seen it in the eyes of those too young to understand what war demanded. "Then let me show you," he said. In an instant, he lifted the ring and shaped a massive construct of energy, a towering figure wielding a sword that glowed like a sun. The ground trembled beneath its weight. "I can protect you. I can help you survive." The soldiers hesitated, caught between terror and the glimmer of a promise they had almost forgotten. Then, as a new scream echoed from the horizon, hesitation gave way to instinct. The enemies had returned. Not tyrannids this time, something darker. Shadows moved unnaturally along the ruins, and from the warp itself, twisted shapes emerged. The first scouting forces of chaos, demonic entities that could bend perception and crush willpower. The soldiers bolted, running for cover where none existed. Hal moved forward, his constructs forming into shields and weapons with thought alone. But he sensed something unsettling. The ring reacted strangely here. Unlike the tyrannids, whose minds were simple, instinctual, and driven purely by hunger, chaos was different. Every demon, every corrupted human, radiated the raw psychic energy of the warp. The ring struggled to pierce it fully. It shivered under the pressure of concentrated malevolence. "This is worse than anything I've ever faced," Hal muttered, tightening his fist. He realized that in this universe, willpower alone might not be enough. The warp was more than a dimension. It was a predator, alive, sentient, and hungry for despair. And in this darkness, even he could be vulnerable. The first demons leaped from the shadows, their forms writhing and grotesque. One struck at him with claws of crackling black energy, and Hal countered by manifesting a shield shaped like a wheel of emerald light. The force of the strike pushed him back, but the ring held. With a thought, he formed twin blades and attacked, slicing through the demonic attackers with precision. Each strike sent energy cascading across the ruins, illuminating the battlefield in brief flashes of green radiance. Even so, Hal could feel the pull of corruption. A whisper brushed against his mind, subtle and seductive. "This universe will consume you. Join us, and your power will be complete." He recoiled, the ring reacting violently to the psychic tug. This was no ordinary enemy. This was the warp, and the warp had centuries of hunger and cunning behind it. The commissar, watching from behind a broken wall, gritted his teeth. "You see now," he said. "These are the powers we fight every day, and yet you come here and speak of hope. Hope is meaningless if it cannot withstand this." Hal did not answer. He could not afford words. The fight demanded every ounce of his focus. Constructs exploded around him, striking demons that tried to encircle him, while the humans fled for shelter. And then he realized something. He could amplify their will, not just his own, but theirs. Even fractured, terrified humans still possessed the spark of courage, and the ring could magnify that spark. He reached out, forming constructs that connected with the minds of the soldiers, creating temporary armor, weapons, and shields that mirrored his will. For the first time, humans were able to stand against demonic forces with Hal, their terrified faces set with determination. They were small flames in a hurricane of darkness, but together they became a wildfire. Hold the line. The commissar shouted, his voice sharper now, steadier, though sweat streaked his dirt-covered face. The soldiers obeyed, and for a brief, shining moment, Cadia seemed to fight back against the universe itself. But Hal knew this was only the beginning. The demons retreated, not because they were defeated, but because they were testing him. Chaos never revealed its full hand at once. Their withdrawal was deliberate, a warning, and Hal could sense the intelligence behind it. Something vast, something ancient, watching, calculating, waiting. Later, after the battle, Hal and the commissar walked among the ruins. Bodies of soldiers and creatures alike littered the ground, a grim testament to the cost of even a minor victory. The humans' fear had not disappeared. If anything, it had deepened. Yet they looked at him with something approaching respect. He had faced the impossible and survived. "You are no ordinary man," the commissar said finally. "Perhaps you are some kind of angel, though angels do not wear such alien armor. You fight with a power we cannot understand." Hal shook his head. "I am no angel. I am a Green Lantern. My power comes from will, from determination, from believing that even in the face of darkness, you can stand and you can fight." The commissar's eyes narrowed. "Then perhaps this universe has need of a power it has not yet earned, or perhaps it is doomed." Hal did not answer immediately. Instead, he studied the horizon, where the warp shimmered and twisted like a living storm. The demons had returned to their master, but they had left a trace, a psychic signature so potent that even his ring struggled to counter it. He could sense it now, the eye of terror itself, the source of the corruption, the heart of the darkness that threatened every world. He had a decision to make. He could remain here, fighting battles one planet at a time, or he could strike at the source, risking everything to challenge the very entity that sought to consume this universe. And in the Green Lantern tradition, Hal knew the answer. He would not wait. He would not let despair dictate the fate of these people. For now he had allies, fragile and untested, but willing. The humans, the commissar, and even the remnants of the space marines he had yet to meet could become instruments of a larger plan. But the question lingered in his mind, the one that haunted every step he took. Can hope, even amplified by the will of one man, survive the weight of this universe? As night fell over the ruined plains of Cadia, Hal Jordan stood at the edge of the battlefield, green light reflecting off shattered towers and bloodied earth. Somewhere in the depths of the warp, eyes watched him. Whispers promised power, corruption, and despair. And yet the Green Lantern did not falter. He would fight. He would endure. And he would prove that even in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, one soul, guided by unyielding will, could illuminate the void. But the darkness was patient, and it had plans of its own. How far can the light of hope shine when the darkness itself is alive and watching, waiting to consume your very soul? The air, or what passed for air in the shattered ruins of Cadia, was heavy with tension. Hal Jordan had proven himself to the surviving humans, his constructs shielding them from horrors that no Imperial soldier had survived before. Yet the brief reprieve had given him no illusions. This universe did not simply test strength. It tested the very essence of being, bending will and spirit until even the most steadfast could crumble. The commissar, now less a skeptic and more a cautious ally, approached Hal as the survivors began to regroup. "You have power," he said, voice still trembling with awe, "but power alone will not defeat what lies beyond." Hal's eyes, glowing emerald in the fading light, scanned the horizon. Beyond the broken plains, beyond shattered fortresses and burning forests, the warp called. It was no mere psychic storm. It was a living ocean of corruption, a dimension that reflected the deepest fears and desires of all who gazed upon it. And it had taken notice of him. "I know," Hal replied. "The warp, it's alive. It senses me. It knows I am not from this universe, and it wants me to fail." The commissar nodded grimly. "Then you must understand it, or you will perish." Even as they spoke, the first signs of warp activity became impossible to ignore. A rift, pulsing with sickly green and violet hues, opened in the sky. The ground quaked, sending dust and debris into the air. From the rift, shapes emerged, twisted forms that defied the mind's ability to comprehend. These were not simple demons. These were manifestations of fear and corruption, sent as scouts by some intelligence far older and more malevolent than any tyrant or Xenos warlord. Hal stepped forward. His ring's energy flared, forming a protective dome around the survivors. "Stay behind me," he ordered. "I can keep you safe, but I need to confront this now." The creatures approached, their forms constantly shifting, eyes multiplying in impossible ways, claws dripping with energy that seemed to burn through reality itself. Hal's constructs struck with precision, slicing and smashing, but the ring strained against the psychic pressure. Every blow required more than skill, it demanded absolute conviction. Every moment of doubt allowed the warp's whispers to creep closer to his mind. "You do not belong here, give in, your power is nothing here." The first whisper, subtle and seductive, tried to probe Hal's thoughts. He felt a surge of fear not for himself, but for the humans he had pledged to protect. If he faltered, even for a second, this universe might lose the only chance it had to survive. He tightened his mental grip, focusing on the lives that depended on him, and his constructs blazed brighter than ever. Twin swords of emerald energy tore through the warps, bond creatures, sending psychic shockwaves that reverberated across the plains. As the last creature dissolved into green light, Hal realized this was only a warning. The real challenge awaited deeper in the warp, at the very heart of chaos. The Eye of Terror itself. The rift in the sky pulsed, an open wound in reality, a gateway to an intelligence that had no patience and no mercy. And it had marked him. The commissar approached, now standing beside Hal, his expression a mixture of fear and awe. "Do you know what you face? The warp, it is a hunger that consumes minds, twists souls, and corrupts even the strongest wills." "I know," Hal said. "But that's why I'm here. Because even in a universe like this, even in the face of darkness that can bend reality, hope matters, and I will fight to prove it." The survivors watched, silently absorbing the enormity of what had just occurred. For the first time, many of them dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, the light could hold. It was fragile, yes, but it was there. Hal turned his gaze to the sky, to the rift still pulsating above. "I have to go in," he said. "I can't just fight on the surface. The source of this corruption, the root of the threat, it lies in the warp itself." The commissar's eyes narrowed. "That is suicide." Hal smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Maybe, but sometimes the impossible choice is the only one left." With that, he focused the ring, channeling willpower so intense it made the ground quake and the air vibrate. A construct formed beneath his feet, a glowing platform of energy, swirling and pulsating as if alive. He stepped onto it and lifted into the air, heading toward the rift. As he ascended, the humans below watched in a mixture of terror and hope, witnessing a single soul daring to challenge the heart of darkness. Inside the rift, the rules of reality began to unravel. Gravity shifted unpredictably, colors twisted into impossible spectrums, and the whispers of the warp became deafening. Hal's mind strained under the psychic assault. the ring flaring violently as he fought to maintain focus. Shapes lunged at him, visions of every fear he had ever felt, every failure, every regret. They were not just attacking his body, but his very sense of self. You are alone, you cannot protect them, you will fail. Hal clenched his jaw, letting his willpower anchor him. I am not alone. I fight for them. I fight for every life worth saving. His constructs flared, forming armor and weapons that radiated a purity the warp had not encountered in millennia. Every whisper of despair was met with a surge of green energy, every shadow of corruption pierced by unwavering resolve. The warp resisted, lashing out, but Hal pressed forward, and then he saw it. A massive, undulating shape, a presence that radiated the weight of eons. Eyes, innumerable and ever watchful, stared at him from every angle. It was aware, intelligent, and it hungered. This was the heart of chaos in this sector, the source of the corruption that had plagued Cadia and countless other worlds. Hal steadied himself. He could feel the ring reacting violently, attempting to counter the immense psychic energy. It wants me to hesitate, to doubt, to falter, but he could not. He would not. For the Imperium, for the survivors, for every flicker of hope in this dying universe, he would endure. And so, with a deep breath and the full force of his will, Hal Jordan prepared to confront the unimaginable. He was no longer just a man in green armor. He was the embodiment of hope, a single light in the endless darkness, and he would prove that even the most corrupt universe could be challenged. The warp roared around him, an endless, living storm of malice and despair, and for the first time it had met a force that would not yield. What happens when the very universe you enter wants you to fail, to doubt, and to surrender everything you are? The warp was alive. It whispered, it clawed, it screamed. Every sense Hal Jordan had, sight, hearing, thought, was assaulted by visions that twisted reality into impossible geometries. Time itself was meaningless here. Seconds stretched into eternities, while centuries seemed to collapse into a heartbeat. He could feel the presence of something immense, a being older than most stars, yet cunning enough to toy with mortal minds like a child with a broken toy. Ahead of him, the warp pulsed with a sickly green and violet light, coalescing into a shape both monstrous and intelligent. The air, or whatever passed for air, here vibrated with psychic malice. Tendrils of energy, alive with corruption, stretched toward him, probing, testing, seeking weakness. And then the creature revealed itself fully, a demon of chaos, vast beyond comprehension, a being that radiated centuries of war, betrayal, and bloodlust. Its eyes, countless and unblinking, bored into Hal, stripping away every layer of certainty. "You do not belong here," the demon whispered, its voice echoing across Hal's mind. "This is our universe. You will break, you will fault, you will despair." Hal steadied himself, focusing on the core of his power, the will. The green lantern ring responded to every heartbeat, every flicker of determination, every unbroken thought of purpose. He conjured constructs around himself, a radiant suit of armor to counter psychic assaults, shields that glimmered with emerald energy, and blades that cut through the corrosive air of the warp. Each movement was deliberate, precise, a dance of light against darkness. The demon lunged. It was not merely physical. It attacked his mind, forcing him to relive every failure, every doubt, every fear he had ever experienced. Images of dying comrades, of Earth under threat, of his own inability to save everyone assaulted him in waves. Each one threatened to crack his concentration, to give the warp an opening. But Hal Jordan did not yield. "I fight for more than myself. I fight for life. I fight for hope. I fight for every soul worth saving in this universe." He focused, amplifying that will through the ring. Emerald energy surged outward, striking the demon like a spear of living light. The entity recoiled, surprised by the intensity of Hal's resolve, for no mortal, or alien, had ever faced it without breaking. The demon recovered quickly, forming tendrils that lashed at him with corrosive force, shredding constructs and tearing through the fragile illusions of reality the ring had created. Hal realized that this battle was not about strength alone. It was a contest of perception, focus, and unyielding will. Every second he wavered, the warp tried to claim him. Every moment of hesitation allowed the demon to whisper more lies, planting seeds of fear. You cannot protect them, you are alone, the Imperium will fall, and it will be your fault. Hal gritted his teeth. No, his green light flared brighter than ever, illuminating the dark warp around him. He reached deeper into the ring, pulling constructs from the raw essence of imagination itself, a fortress of emerald towers, blades that moved independently to defend him, and finally, a massive construct shaped like a colossal hand reaching forward. He grasped the demon with it, binding it not physically, but with pure willpower, forcing it to confront the immovable determination of his mind. The demon shrieked, a sound that could have shattered planets if it existed in the material universe, thrashing and twisting against the invisible bonds. But Hal did not release it. He poured every ounce of conviction into the struggle, allowing the ring to channel hope itself into a tangible, unbreakable force. At that moment, the nature of the warp revealed itself in full. The environment around him twisted and warped to mirror the intensity of the battle realities folded in on themselves, time splintered, and space bent like a funhouse mirror. Hal's constructs glimmered against the shifting backdrop, the only constant in a storm of madness. And yet he felt it. The demon's resistance was weakening, not because it was defeated, but because it had underestimated the strength of a will unbroken by fear. Suddenly, the demon spoke again, softer this time, almost incredulous. How can one mortal endure what eons of despair could not destroy? Hal allowed himself a small, grim smile. Because I am not just a mortal. I am a Green Lantern, and I fight for every soul that cannot fight for itself. With a final surge, Hal intensified his constructs, squeezing the demon in a grip of living energy. The warp screamed, a soundless cacophony of despair, as the entity writhed, clawing at the barriers of Hal's mind. And then, in an explosion of emerald light that rippled across the very fabric of the warp, the demon was forced to retreat, dissolving into tendrils of shadow that shrieked in defeat. Hal staggered, drained but resolute. He had won the first confrontation with chaos itself, proving that the Green Lantern's willpower could survive even in the heart of the warp. Yet he knew this was only the beginning. For every demon defeated, countless others waited. For every victory, there would be greater challenges, each more insidious than the last. The eye of terror was still ahead, its heart dark, ancient, and hungry. And yet, as he looked out across the shifting, chaotic landscape of the warp, Hal felt a spark of something extraordinary. Even here, in a universe defined by war and despair, light could endure. Hope could exist, and if one Green Lantern could survive this trial, perhaps the Imperium itself could learn to grasp even the faintest ember of salvation. The Commissar's voice came faintly across the void, carried by Hal's focus. You may have survived this, but the universe does not forgive lightly. What comes next will be worse. Hal nodded, gripping the ring tightly. Then I will be ready. Whatever comes, I will not falter. Not now, not ever. The Green Lantern pressed forward into the heart of the warp, each step a defiance against the endless night, each heartbeat a promise. Light will not be extinguished, not while even one soul dares. To fight. What happens when a universe that trusts only steel and faith is offered a power it cannot comprehend? The ruins of Cadia were quiet, if the word quiet could ever apply in the aftermath of ceaseless war. Survivors huddled among shattered fortresses and smoking debris, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and suspicion. Hal Jordan descended from the pulsating rift in the sky, his constructs fading as his feet touched the blood-stained ground. His emerald armor glimmered faintly, a stark contrast to the gray and crimson of the Imperium soldiers' fatigues. The commissar approached, hands trembling slightly not from fear, but from the realization that the events of the last hours had changed everything. "You survived the warp," he said, voice low, almost reverent, "and yet you return." "I have to," Hal replied. "The battle is only beginning. The source of this corruption, the Eye of Terror itself, is not idle, and if it is left unchecked, it will consume every world, every life, every hope in this sector. I cannot let that happen." The commissar's eyes narrowed. "And you expect us to simply follow someone we do not understand?" Hal shook his head. "I don't ask for blind obedience. I ask for trust and courage. If you stand with me, I can show you a way to fight that does not rely solely on despair and bloodshed, but it requires belief in yourselves, in each other, and in the possibility of victory." A figure emerged from the shadows, a space marine, towering and clad in the blue and gold of the Ultramarines chapter, his armor scarred from countless battles. His gauntleted hand rested on the hilt of a chainsword, and his eyes, visible beneath the helmet, held centuries of experience and suspicion. "You speak of hope," he said, voice deep and resonant, "yet our lives are measured in survival, not dreams. Who are you, stranger, that you dare lecture warriors of the Imperium?" Hal stepped forward, meeting the Marine's gaze directly. "I am Hal Jordan. In my universe, I am a Green Lantern. I wield a power fueled by willpower, by the belief that even in the darkest times, life is worth defending. Here, in your universe, the same principles apply. I cannot replace your training, your courage, or your skill, but I can help amplify them. I can give you a weapon you have never held, one that bends reality to your will." The Space Marine considered him silently, analyzing, judging. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Very well, Hal Jordan of another world. We will see if your power matches your words. The enemies you describe will not wait for speeches." The first coordinated strike came within hours. Scouts of chaos, twisted by the warp and eager to probe the Imperium's defenses, assaulted a nearby settlement. Hal's constructs rose immediately, forming walls and weapons that protected civilians while creating pathways for the Imperial soldiers to counterattack. What had been fear and hesitation in the troops now transformed into disciplined action. They fought with renewed purpose, inspired by the tangible manifestation of hope at their side. As the battle raged, Hal realized the unique opportunity this alliance presented. Space Marines were formidable warriors, genetically enhanced and fanatically loyal, capable of extraordinary feats of endurance and combat skill. Yet even they were vulnerable to psychic attacks, ambushes, and the overwhelming forces of chaos. By combining their disciplined might with the ring's reality, bending power, they could turn the tide of engagements that would have otherwise been hopeless. Between skirmishes, Hal convened with the Commissar and the Ultramarine captain. Maps of nearby worlds, warp rifts, and reported chaos movements lay before them. Hal pointed to a cluster of systems that had resisted the Imperium's attention for decades. "These planets are at risk," he said. "If chaos consolidates here, it could create a corridor straight to the core of your segmentum. We must act before it spreads further, but we cannot do it alone. Your forces are strong, but Coordinated with my constructs and strategies, we can slow the corruption, and perhaps even reclaim lost ground. The Commissar frowned. "You speak of reclaiming worlds," he said. "That is heresy for many in the Imperium. Worlds are lost, sacrificed, or burned in service to the Emperor's will. You promise something unprecedented, that is dangerous." Hal's gaze was steady. "Dangerous, yes. Impossible, perhaps. But if we do nothing, every world, every human, every fragment of hope will be erased. I did not come here to follow your rules. I came to fight for survival. And if that means defying tradition, then so be it." The Space Marine's voice cut through the tension. "Then we fight, not blindly, but together. The Emperor may grant us strength, and if your light endures, stranger, it will be a weapon we have not yet wielded." The decision was made. Hal would train selected squads, amplifying their courage and resilience with constructs that mimicked weapons and armor in ways impossible for conventional technology. Tactical strategies, previously limited by fear and uncertainty, now gained new dimensions. Walls that could shift in moments, weapon platforms that appeared out of thin air, and shields strong enough to deflect demon energy. Over the next cycle, Hal and his allies conducted coordinated strikes against Chaos warbands, reclaiming territory that had been lost to despair for decades. Each victory was costly, each success tempered by the knowledge that the Eye of Terror still waited, and that the demonic entities he had faced in the warp were only scouts of a larger, unimaginable force. Yet, with each battle, the Imperium's forces began to understand what hope truly meant, how courage could be amplified, how determination could turn the tide even in the bleakest moments. Hal watched the soldiers adapt, his constructs now seamlessly integrated with their tactics. The humans fought with renewed purpose, and even the Space Marines acknowledged the strategic advantage he provided. For the first time, in countless millennia of endless war, a glimmer of optimism surfaced. But Hal also knew the truth. Chaos was patient. The Eye of Terror was more than a battlefield. It was a living, thinking entity. Every minor victory was a ripple across its consciousness, provoking it, testing it, preparing it to strike back in ways that could break even the strongest minds. The coming war would not merely be fought with weapons or constructs. It would be fought in the minds, hearts, and very wills of those who dared to resist. As Hal stood on the edge of a reclaimed fortress, overlooking the battle-scarred plains of Cadia, he felt the weight of what lay ahead. He had allies now human and superhuman, trained and tested, but the enemy was vast, unrelenting, and merciless. And yet, for the first time, he also felt something that had been missing from this universe for centuries: a chance, a sliver of possibility that even here, in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, life might endure. The shadows of chaos still stretched across the stars, but Hal Jordan's light was no longer alone. It had companions. It had purpose, and together they would face the coming storm. What do you do when the line between salvation and annihilation is measured in blood and willpower? Hal Jordan stood at the edge of the command platform, overlooking the map of a system long considered lost to the Imperium. The planet below, once a thriving hub of human civilization, was now a fortress of corruption. Towers twisted by warp energy jutted into the sky, black smoke curling upward, carrying the scent of death and decay. Every transmission from orbit confirmed the same horrifying truth. This world was held by the forces of chaos, and their grip was absolute. Beside him, the ultramarine captain observed silently, his gauntleted hand resting on the hilt of his chainsword. "If we fail," he said, his voice low but firm, "this world will be lost forever, and the Imperium will suffer more than just this loss." Hal's eyes glimmered green, reflecting the glow of his ring. "Then we cannot fail. I can give you tools, constructs that bend reality, but you must fight with everything you have: courage, strategy, and willpower. These are the weapons no demon can break." The soldiers and space marines prepared, bolstered by the constructs Hal created. Shields that shimmered with unbreakable energy, weapons adapted from their own arms but enhanced with emerald light, and even temporary fortifications that rose and fell at a thought. For the first time, the humans felt a synergy they had never experienced. Their weapons, training, and instincts were amplified by the ring's power, turning them into a force capable of challenging even the demonic occupiers. As the drop pods hit the planet's surface, the first wave of Chaos Defenders emerged. Horrific mutants, demons, and corrupted war machines surged forward, intent on annihilating the intruders. Yet Hal was ready. Constructs shaped like massive fists and towers rose instantly, creating cover and channels for the troops to advance. Energy blades cut through the warp, twisted monstrosities with surgical precision, and shields deflected blasts that would have leveled entire streets. The Imperium's soldiers moved cautiously at first, their eyes wide at the sight of constructs that responded instantly to thought, forming barriers, weapons, and platforms in real time. But as the battle progressed, they adapted. Orders flowed with renewed confidence, bolstered by the visible proof that Hal's power could turn even hopeless engagements into tactical victories. Still, the forces of chaos were relentless. Warp energy twisted the terrain, creating traps and illusions that threatened to overwhelm even Hal's ring. Demons lunged from the shadows, attempting to invade minds and break willpower. Hal countered, focusing harder than ever. Every construct, every defensive wall, every weapon he manifested was an extension of his determination, not just to survive, but to inspire those who stood with him. Midway through the battle, a massive demon emerged from a rift, larger and more terrifying than anything Hal had faced directly. Its eyes, countless and filled with malevolent intelligence, locked onto him. "You will break." It hissed in a voice that reverberated through the minds of every soldier. "This world, your allies, your hope, it will be mine." Hal's response was simple, unwavering focus. He channeled willpower through the ring, forming constructs that coiled around the demon like chains of light, cutting off its movement while simultaneously projecting barriers to protect the troops. "You are wrong," Hal said, voice steady, "because I do not fight alone. We fight together." The Imperium soldiers, seeing the power and determination of Hal's constructs, advanced with renewed courage. Space Marines led charges, bolstered by temporary armor and weapon enhancements, striking with precision and discipline that overwhelmed the demon's attention. The humans followed, their fear transformed into purpose, their determination strengthened by the knowledge that their lives, and the fate of countless others, depended on their will to fight. Even as the battle raged, Hal realized the toll it was taking on him. The warp's influence here was stronger, more invasive, and even the Green Lantern ring struggled to maintain stability. Every second spent creating constructs and shielding mines drained his energy, yet he refused to falter. To falter now would mean the loss of the planet, the soldiers, and the fragile hope he had ignited across the sector. In a climactic surge, Hal unleashed a massive construct, a towering humanoid figure wielding twin swords of pure green energy. It struck at the demon with unrelenting force, shattering its defenses and pushing it back into the rift from which it had emerged. The warp shrieked in fury, but the soldiers pressed forward, reclaiming ground and securing strategic positions across the corrupted city. By the end of the engagement, the planet was not fully liberated chaos, would always find ways to infiltrate and corrupt. But a foothold had been established. The Imperium's forces had survived, and for the first time in centuries, a planet that had been written off as lost saw the possibility of redemption. Hal descended to the battlefield, his armor scorched but intact, his eyes glowing with determination. The soldiers approached him, some silently, some with hesitant gratitude. "You did not just fight," the commissar said, voice trembling with awe. "You gave us hope, real hope." Hal nodded, feeling the exhaustion but also the quiet satisfaction of a battle hard, fought and won. "This is only the beginning," he said. "Chaos is patient, and the eye of terror still waits. But if we continue to fight together, we can reclaim worlds, we can turn the tide, we can survive." The ultramarine captain stepped forward, placing a hand on Hal's shoulder, a gesture of respect rarely given to outsiders. "Then we fight," he said, "not as humans or aliens, but as warriors of the Imperium united by the will to survive. Lead us, Green Lantern, and we will follow. But remember, the darkness beyond is patient. It does not forgive." Hal looked out across the battlefield, at the smoking ruins, the recovering soldiers, and the faint shimmer of his constructs fading into the night. He understood the truth. The Imperium was battered, scarred, and tested beyond endurance. Yet it still fought. And with the ring's power, and with the courage he had ignited in these soldiers, it could survive longer than any of its enemies expected. But deep in the shadows, within the remaining warp rifts, unseen eyes watched. The demons were not defeated. They were delayed. And far beyond, the eye of terror pulsed with anticipation, preparing for the day when Hal Jordan's light would finally confront its full, unrelenting darkness. For now, Hal and his allies had a victory, but the war had only just begun. What happens when victory turns into a trap, and every ounce of willpower is tested against the cunning of an enemy that cannot be reasoned with? The reclaimed planet, though a victory in many eyes, now revealed the true nature of the war Hal Jordan had entered. The streets were eerily quiet, the fires of battle replaced by the whispers of the warp. Scouts returned with grim reports. Not all Chaos forces had retreated. Hidden deep beneath the city, in tunnels twisted by psychic energy, the demons had regrouped, preparing ambushes that would strike when the Imperium least expected it. Hal hovered above the city, constructs surrounding him like an emerald fortress. The humans and space marines below were preparing defenses, but he sensed the growing pressure of unseen forces. The warp, far more intelligent than he had first realized, was adapting to him. It no longer attacked openly. It tested, manipulated, and prodded, seeking the precise moment to turn his strength into weakness. Then the first strike came not from 100 demons, but a single, calculated strike. A warp's bond entity appeared in the city center, a demon unlike any Hal had faced. Its form was fluid, constantly shifting, and its eyes burned with a knowing intelligence. It did not rush forward blindly. It waited, observing, testing, striking at the moments when fear and doubt flickered in the hearts of men. Hal reacted immediately, raising constructs to shield the Imperium soldiers. But this enemy was different. Every block, every blade, every weapon Hal manifested was countered almost instinctively. The demon exploited gaps, twisted space around his constructs, and sent psychic feedback that destabilized the ring temporarily. For the first time, Hal felt the raw limits of his power in this universe. The Imperium forces, though bolstered by his constructs, faltered. Space Marines were thrown into confusion by psychic distortions, and human soldiers panicked under pressure. The once cohesive defense crumbled as the demon struck at critical points, tearing through barricades and sowing chaos. The battle was no longer a straightforward fight. It was a test of endurance, intellect, and willpower under conditions where victory seemed nearly impossible. Hal realized he could not overpower this enemy with sheer force. The ring, for all its power, responded to will. But here, the warp's intelligence could probe for hesitation, doubt, and fear. Every moment of uncertainty weakened him. If he continued to fight in the same manner, he risked losing not only the planet, but the very hope he had ignited among the Imperium soldiers. He needed a new approach. Hal closed his eyes, drawing deeply on the core principle of the Green Lantern, imagination tempered by will. Instead of brute constructs, he began shaping intricate traps and illusions, using the enemy's intelligence against itself. Walls shifted to funnel the demon into predictable paths. Constructs mimicked retreating soldiers to lure it into ambushes, and psychic shields reflected its own attacks back upon it. The demon, initially confident, faltered. It had expected raw power, not cunning strategy. Hal pressed his advantage, forcing it to overextend and exposing the war-tainted infrastructure beneath the city. With a coordinated strike, he sent twin constructs slicing through the enemy's anchor points, destabilizing its ability to manifest fully in the material plane. Yet even in this tactical brilliance, the cost was clear. Hal's concentration drained him rapidly, every construct pulling at his energy reserves. His body ached, his mind teetered on the edge of exhaustion, and the whispers of the warp became louder, more insistent. You cannot protect them, you will fail, everything you fight for will burn. The ultramarine captain observed the struggle, recognizing the unprecedented effort required of the Green Lantern. Even one of you is extraordinary, he said quietly to the commissar, yet even extraordinary is not invincible here. Chaos is patient and cunning. It waits, studies, and strikes when the weak are exposed, and even the strong are tested. Despite the setback, Hal endured. He adapted his strategy in real time, weaving willpower, imagination, and tactical brilliance into a single, flowing effort. Slowly, inch by inch, the demon was weakened and forced back into a collapsing warp rift. The city was saved for now, but the lesson was undeniable. Raw strength and hope alone were insufficient. Against the cunning of chaos, even the Green Lantern must anticipate, adapt, and endure beyond imagination. Hal landed among the soldiers, breathing heavily, his armor scratched and scorched from the psychic backlash. The humans and space marines looked at him with a mixture of reverence and concern. "You have shown us a way to fight," the commissar said. "But even your power has limits. What happens when the enemy grows smarter than you?" Hal's gaze swept the battlefield, lingering on the flickering warp rifts. "Then we adapt again, we learn, we survive. Hope isn't about never failing. It's about standing up even when failure is inevitable." And he knew the truth. The eye of terror itself would soon test that lesson, and the coming battle would push his ring, his willpower, and the Imperium's forces to their absolute limits. The shadow of chaos was patient, but Hal Jordan was not one to yield. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. How do you confront a force that is not only ancient and powerful, but cunning, patient, and utterly merciless? The skies above the reclaimed city of Cadia burned with unnatural colors. The warp itself seemed to pulse in anticipation, sending ripples through space, time that twisted perception and distorted sound. Hal Jordan hovered above the ruins, green constructs forming instinctively around him, sensing the presence of an intelligence far beyond the scouts and minor demons he had faced before. It emerged slowly, as if the universe itself were introducing the predator to its prey. The Chaos Warlord, a towering figure clad in spiked black and crimson armor, etched with runes that writhed like living fire, descended onto the battlefield. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent intelligence that made even the Space Marines pause in awe. This was not a mindless beast, nor a simple soldier of the warp. This was strategy incarnate, a commander of horrors who had survived eons and bent entire worlds to its will. Hal's constructs flared. Twin blades of emerald energy formed in his hands, towers of light rose around him, and shields shimmered, reflecting the psychic darkness radiating from the warlord. The humans and Space Marines braced themselves, instinctively understanding that their survival depended on the Green Lantern's strength, ingenuity, and courage. The warlord spoke, its voice echoing across minds, a mixture of mockery and menace. "You are far from home, alien. Do you truly believe your light can pierce the darkness of my dominion? I have consumed worlds, devoured empires, broken the wills of saints and tyrants alike. You are nothing." Hal's response was unwavering. "I am not here to fight for myself. I fight for those who cannot fight. And as long as hope exists, there is a way to survive, even against you." The first strike was sudden and brutal. The warlord's massive blade, crackling with warp energy, swung at Hal, shattering nearby constructs and sending debris raining down on the Imperium forces. The Ultramarine captain led a coordinated charge, bolstered by Hal's energy constructs, but the warlord anticipated every move, countering with psychic precision and overwhelming force. Hal realized immediately that brute force alone would not suffice. The warlord's mastery of the warp allowed it to manipulate reality around them. Buildings folded into impossible geometries. The ground seemed to liquefy, and shadowy apparitions assaulted the minds of the soldiers. Even Hal's ring, powerful as it was, strained under the psychic pressure. He adapted. Constructs shifted constantly, forming labyrinthine patterns, shields that reacted before the attacks arrived, and weapons that struck preemptively at the gaps in the warlord's defenses. Every strike he made was deliberate, every movement a test of strategy and willpower. The humans and Space Marines pressed forward, inspired by Hal's resilience. Bolstered by constructs that enhanced their weapons and armor, they engaged the warlord in a coordinated assault. Space Marine squads struck with disciplined precision, while human soldiers set traps guided by the green light that now symbolized hope itself. Yet the warlord was not merely reactive. It anticipated, learning with every engagement. It manipulated the battlefield, creating illusions that forced soldiers to attack shadows, using psychic attacks to turn allies against one another. Hal realized this confrontation was not just physical. It was a battle of minds, of determination, of absolute focus. He pushed harder, channeling willpower into the constructs, amplifying the courage of every soldier who fought beside him. Emerald energy surged, forming massive chains that bound the warlord's movements, while twin swords of light cut through the psychic distortions and projected barriers of warp energy. The warlord screamed, a soundless howl that resonated across minds, but Hal did not falter. In a decisive move, Hal created a colossal construct shaped like an enormous hand of pure energy. It reached for the warlord, gripping and holding it in place while simultaneously shielding the Imperium soldiers from psychic backlash. The warlord lashed out, sending waves of corruption that splintered constructs and twisted space, but Hal's concentration remained unbroken. Finally, with a surge of willpower that drew on every lesson he had learned in the warp, every battle fought, every soldier inspired, Hal crushed the warlord's anchoring point to reality. The armor shattered, runes dissolved, and the entity shrieked as it was forced back into a rift, retreating for now but leaving scars across the battlefield. The Imperium soldiers, though battered and exhausted, stood victorious. They had faced an entity that had toppled worlds, yet survived not through blind courage alone, but by embracing hope and determination amplified by Hal's light. The commissar approached, looking at Hal with a mixture of awe and newfound understanding. "You are unlike anything we have known. You have given us a chance, a way to fight that we never imagined possible." Hal looked over the battlefield, seeing both the destruction and the potential for rebuilding. "This is just one warlord," he said. "The Eye of Terror is vast, its generals are countless, but today we proved that even the most overwhelming darkness can be resisted. We will need strategy, courage, and willpower more than ever before." The ultramarine captain nodded. "Then we fight onward, Green Lantern, not for glory, not for reward, but because if we do not, the galaxy will fall, and with your light guiding us, perhaps we can endure." Hal raised his ring, the green glow spreading across the battlefield, symbolizing hope, courage, and the unyielding strength of will. For the first time in countless millennia, the Imperium did not feel utterly alone in the face of chaos. But even in victory, the shadows of the Eye of Terror loomed. The warlord was only one of many, and the real battle, the heart of the darkness, was yet to come. Hal Jordan, Green Lantern of another universe, had faced the first true general of chaos and survived. Yet he knew that the coming trials would demand even greater courage, ingenuity, and unbreakable will. The storm was far from over. How do you fight a darkness that is not just a force, but a mind, a will, a universe of malice bent on annihilation? The Eye of Terror loomed above the horizon, a swirling maelstrom of raw warp energy, its colors impossible to describe, and its presence a constant psychic assault. Even from orbit, the sheer scale of the rift dwarfed any battle Hal had ever faced. This was no single warlord, no scout or demon. It was the heart of chaos itself, alive, sentient, and infinitely patient. Every pulse, every ripple from the eye carried intent to destroy hope, to twist reality, to break the minds of all who dared approach. Hal Jordan hovered at the forefront of the Imperium fleet, constructs forming around him like a citadel of green light. The Space Marines and Imperial soldiers looked to him, their faith in the Emperor bolstered by the tangible symbol of hope beside them. The rift's energies twisted the void of space itself, sending psychic waves that threatened to drive even the strongest minds into madness. "We've never faced anything like this," the ultramarine captain admitted, gripping his chainsword. "Not even the most powerful demons or Xenos could prepare us for the Eye's reach. We will need every advantage, and even then, survival is not guaranteed." Hal's response was calm, resolute. "We do not survive by guarantees. We survive by willpower, determination, and by refusing to yield. Today, we fight for every world, every life, every soul that cannot fight for itself. We are the shield against despair, and together we are stronger than this darkness." The first assault came swiftly. Rifts opened across the fleet, spewing waves of demons and corrupted ships. Warp energy tore through armor, instruments, and mines, attempting to destabilize the Imperium forces before they even reached the Eye itself. Hal responded instantly, forming shields that rippled with emerald energy, deflecting blasts, and creating platforms to stabilize disabled ships. Constructed weapons appeared across the fleet, striking at demons before they could breach the lines. But the Eye was no ordinary enemy. It manipulated reality, bending time and space around the fleet, isolating ships, and forcing Hal to adapt at every moment. Every construct he made had to be reshaped continuously, not just for defense, but to counter the unpredictable and intelligent assaults from the warp. Even with his ring's immense power, the Eye's influence gnawed at Hal's concentration. Whispers invaded his mind. "You cannot protect them, every Al. I will fall, your will is insignificant here." The words were not just threats, they were temptations, designed to exploit any doubt, any hesitation, any weakness. Hal gritted his teeth, forcing focus. "I do not fight for myself. I fight for them. I fight for life. I fight for hope." Constructs surged, shields expanded, and weapons struck with precision that even the warp could not anticipate. On the surface of the eye, where the rift's power manifested most violently, a colossal figure appeared, a demon lord of unimaginable scale, its form constantly shifting, its eyes radiating centuries of cunning and malice. It was the eye's champion, the ultimate enforcer of chaos, a creature meant to crush all resistance. Hal advanced, forming a towering humanoid construct of pure energy. Each strike was met with psychic backlash, forcing him to weave his constructs with the will of every soldier fighting alongside him. Space Marines struck at the demon's anchor points. Human soldiers coordinated attacks guided by Hal's constructs, and for a fleeting moment, hope pierced the overwhelming darkness. But the Eye of Terror responded. The warp twisted around Hal's constructs, bending, snapping, and reforming them against him. The psychic pressure surged, threatening to overwhelm not only his concentration, but his very mind. Hal felt exhaustion clawing at him. Even the ring, powered by the strongest will imaginable, began to falter under the intensity. Then, in the heart of the battle, Hal realized the truth. He could not rely on power alone. The Eye and its champion were intelligent. They were patience incarnate. Victory would come only through ingenuity, sacrifice, and the unwavering resolve of every soldier united by a single purpose. Hal expanded his constructs in a new form, a lattice of energy connecting every vessel, every soldier, every willing mind in the fleet. He projected not just shields and weapons, but shared focus, amplifying the will of the Imperium forces across the battlefield. Every act of courage became a ripple of green light, feeding constructs, deflecting warp energy, and striking at the champion with coordinated precision. The demon lord screeched, sensing the shift. It lashed out, attempting to shatter the lattice, but every assault was countered by the amplified determination of mortal wills, channeled through Hal's ring. Step by step, the champion was pushed back, anchored by constructs that could respond instantly to even the most unpredictable warp phenomena. Hours passed in a timeless blur. The fleet, battered but unbroken, pressed forward under Hal's guidance. Every victory was costly, every maneuver a test of endurance, but the combined will of Hal and the Imperium soldiers carved a path through the chaos, weakening the demon lord and disrupting Eye's control over the battlefield. Finally, with a surge of unparalleled concentration and will, Hal formed a massive construct, a spear of green light, and struck at the demon lord's core, anchoring it to reality. The impact shattered the creature's form, forcing it into a retreating rift, leaving the Eye's surface momentarily destabilized. The Imperium fleet, though heavily damaged, survived. For the first time, they had stood against the full power of the Eye of Terror and endured. Hope, fragile and battered, burned brighter than ever. Hal hovered amidst the wreckage, exhausted but resolute. The Imperium soldiers and Space Marines looked to him with awe. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The Eye of Terror still pulsed with intent, a patient predator awaiting the next opportunity. Hal's voice cut through the psychic haze, steady and unwavering. "Today we have survived. Tomorrow we continue. The Eye may be vast, patient, and cunning, but together we are stronger. We will not yield. We will endure. We will fight." The shadows of the warp still stretched across the stars, but a beacon of green light shone, guiding the Imperium through the darkness. What happens when one soul's light is the last line between survival and total annihilation? The eye of terror swirled above the battlefield, a colossal maelstrom of pure malice, its energy stretching across light, years, and twisting reality itself. The Imperium fleet hovered on the brink, battered but unbroken, while Hal Jordan hovered at its center, green light radiating from his ring with a brilliance that defied the darkness around him. The final confrontation had arrived. The Eye's champion, the Demon Lord, emerged once more, this time accompanied by an army of demonic titans and warps, bond horrors. Their combined force was overwhelming, an onslaught designed to crush every shred of hope the Imperium had left. Hal's constructs flared into life, forming shields, weapons, and platforms, but even his imagination strained under the sheer scale of the assault. He realized the truth. This battle could not be fought alone. Not even a Green Lantern could hold back the heart of chaos indefinitely. He needed the Imperium itself to rise to its full potential, to fight not just with steel, but with courage, strategy, and the conviction that light could endure. He connected his constructs to every willing soldier, every space marine, every Imperial vessel. The lattice of green energy spread like a web, amplifying their courage, focus, and determination. Every act of bravery, every disciplined strike, every prayer whispered to the Emperor became a pulse of green light that strengthened the constructs and countered the warp's influence. The Demon Lord advanced, its eyes locking onto Hal with malicious intelligence. Your light cannot last. Every soul here will break. Every hope will shatter, and you, alien, will be consumed. Hal's reply was calm but resolute. I fight not for myself. I fight for all who cannot fight. As long as even one of us stands, the light endures. The first clash was cataclysmic. Constructs collided with the demon's titanic force, sending shockwaves that fractured space and twisted the battlefield. Warp energy lashed outward, attempting to breach the lattice, but every pulse of fear was met with a surge of hope. Every attempt to shatter will was countered by unwavering determination. Hours, though time was meaningless in the warp, passed in a blur of battle. Soldiers adapted, constructs shifted, and Hal pushed his ring to its absolute limits. For every demon that fell, another seemed to rise, but the Imperium forces had learned to trust their new ally. The synergy between human courage, space marine discipline, and the Green Lantern's constructs created something the Eye had never encountered. Hope made tangible, a force capable of resisting even its most cunning manipulations. But victory demanded sacrifice. Hal realized that to permanently destabilize the Eye's influence, he would have to channel a direct attack into its heart. A surge of willpower so immense that it could destroy his connection to the material universe. To strike at the Eye, he would risk his life, his ring, and possibly his entire essence. The decision was immediate. Hal's eyes glowed brighter than ever as he formed a colossal spear of green energy, taller than any building, stretching into the heart of the Eye. Stay strong, he called to the Imperium forces. Focus your will, fight, do not let them break you. The Demon Lord sensed the attack, lashing out with everything it possessed, but Hal's constructs absorbed, deflected, and struck back. With a final surge, he drove the spear into the Eye of Terror, channeling every ounce of courage, imagination, and determination he had gathered across galaxies. The maelstrom roared, twisting violently, but Hal's light held steady. The Eye of Terror screamed, a psychic roar that shook the fleet, ripped the sky, and threatened to annihilate all in its path. But the Imperium, inspired by Hal's sacrifice, held firm. Every soldier fought with renewed purpose. Every space marine struck with unrelenting precision, and together they amplified the light through the lattice Hal had woven. Then, in a cataclysmic explosion of emerald energy, the Eye's heart fractured. Its influence weakened, its rifts destabilized, and the demonic army scattered, retreating back into the warp. The Eye itself remained, a scar across reality, but its reach had been diminished, its immediate threat neutralized. Hal fell from the lattice, exhausted, barely conscious. Space Marines and Imperial soldiers rushed to his side, holding him aloft. His ring glowed faintly, struggling to maintain life, but his eyes, though weary, still shone with resolve. The Commissar spoke, voice trembling, You have done the impossible. You have turned despair into hope, alien. The Imperium may yet endure." Hal nodded faintly. "Hope is never lost. Even in the darkest places, even when the odds are impossible, it survives. It lives in those who refuse to yield." The ultramarine captain placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we fight on. We will rebuild, reclaim, and resist. Your light has shown us that even in the grim darkness, we are not without hope." And though the Eye of Terror still pulsed ominously, its influence diminished. The Imperium now had a symbol of something it had not possessed in millennia. A light in the darkness, a tangible force that proved survival was possible. Hal Jordan, Green Lantern from another universe, had not just survived the 41st millennium. He had changed it. He had shown that even the most implacable darkness could be challenged, that willpower, courage, and hope could alter the fate of worlds. The battle was over, the war was not, but one truth remained: where there is light, there is resistance. Where there is will, there is hope. And as long as one soul dares to fight, even in the grim darkness of the far future, the universe is not lost.